Real estate millionaires are able to buy house after house. Meanwhile, the middle-class citizens of America aren't even able to afford one house, let alone an investment property. What if I told you that you could have both and it might even allow for you to live for free, plus you probably have a head start that nobody talks about? In today's video, we're going to be going over how you can find a flexible property that you can house hack in order to buy your first property and start your real estate investing journey. I'm actually super excited about this whole video idea because I feel like it's the perfect way to start investing into real estate, and it's one of the most asked questions that I get. But to get started, I feel like we have to know what house hacking even is. Essentially, you're buying a property with a dwelling on it or no dwelling on it, and you're adding creative ways to make more income based off of that property. This could look as simple as buying a duplex, you living in one side, renting out the other, and pocketing that income. Or it could even go as far as adding an ADU in the back, renting it out on Airbnb, and making that cash flow to hopefully pay off your mortgage. Seriously guys, with house hacking, the possibilities are endless, so we have to get a little creative today. So the first step to finding your perfect house hacking property is obviously going to be determining your scenario, because not everything that's going to work for you is going to work for me, and vice versa. So some of the questions that I would keep in mind when determining this is how many people live with you. Obviously something else that's super important is where you live, if you're willing to relocate, and what the average home prices are in the area that you're interested in. Odds are if you're living in a bigger city, you're going to have less startup homes, therefore costing more expensive, and they might not just be entry-level homes. Whereas maybe if you move into the suburbs, you have a few more options, things are still developing, so there's a lot more room for growth. And not to mention, you're going to have more land space, which is going to be a little bit beneficial with some of these ideas that we're going to talk about. Now, this next one I think is something that most people don't talk about, and I just say this because I brought it up in a few friend groups and everyone had a different idea of what they needed. So I think this is something that's really important to consider. And that's how extreme you're willing to house hack or how not extreme you're willing to go with it, because we're going to talk about some strategies where you might have to compromise a little bit on personal space, sharing certain items. So there's really a broad spectrum as to how far you can go with it. And lastly is how active you want to be in this endeavor, because we're going to talk about some strategies where you're either just going to rent it out once and leave it how it is, or maybe you could even hire a property manager, which is going to cost you a little bit more. However, you're going to have that peace of mind. Or on the opposite end, you're going to be managing Airbnbs, where you're going to have to be very active and very on top of things. So this is really going to depend on what you're looking for. Once you know your scenario and how involved you want to be in this process, we got to know where to search, and my go-to is Zillow. And this is because you can find off-market deals, on-market deals, hidden deals. But of course, there's a ton of other resources that you can use to find properties, so make sure to check out my free real estate investing guide down in the description. So now we're gonna get down to the nitty-gritty, and that's finding what you're looking for, what's gonna fit your scenario best, and some ideas that can help you get started. And a few more things just to keep in mind when we're looking through these is obviously the cost of the project, county zoning and regulations, utility and the infrastructure that you might need for some of these projects, and of course, fences for privacy and just making sure that you have your own space. And if you guys want a video on any of those topics or how to even budget for your project like this, make sure to leave a comment down below. One of the most popular house hacking ideas is to obviously buy a duplex, live in one side, and rent out the others. From what I've seen, this has gotten so much popularity in the last few years that most of these duplexes are going for way more than they used to. So being able to actually make enough rent off of one of the units for you to live in the other one, I've noticed is a little harder. This is one property that I found in Oklahoma City, $220K, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, so we can only anticipate that each apartment has 1 bed, 1 bath. Remodel looks kind of cute, maybe needs some painting on the outside. But all in all, this was a pretty attractive house to me for multiple reasons, obviously being a duplex in a more affordable area. Seems like it was recently remodeled, seems like a good investment. Obviously, you have to look a lot deeper into this. This is just a very fast analysis. And then looking at the rent zestimate right here, it's about $1,600 a month. Purchase price being $2,200. I like to keep the rent at 1% of the purchase price, so clearly we're gonna be living out on one side. You probably wouldn't be able to live for free in this one, just because I feel like the rent is a little low. If you did do the house hacking strategy, living in one side, renting out the other, I do believe you could still get away with paying a very minimal living fee, if you will, because you're going to be paying a lot less than if you were to just buy a full house and live in the whole entire thing. The next one is a twist off of the duplex thing, and it's buying a single family residence. And if the floor plan is nice enough, sometimes you can get away with splitting it into 2 apartments. Looking at this property here that I found, this is in Fort Worth, Texas. We're looking at $315K. Clearly, we can see that there's 2 separate entrances here. It also seems like you have 2 separate living spaces. I couldn't find anything with floor plans, but that would definitely be the next step on something like this, or just going out and seeing it in person. For the space that you're getting, the house, and just the 2 entrances that you're gonna have, depending on the floor plan, this would look like a great investment. And now we're gonna start getting into the more creative stuff, which I absolutely love. What we're gonna show you guys here is larger properties, so not the house itself. You wanna obviously have a house because it's gonna be easier to finance, but the property itself is where you're gonna find your money. And for this house, we're looking at one in North Carolina, $315,000. I try to keep most of these under the 500 range because I feel like they're a little more accessible, still expensive, don't get me wrong. So this house here was intriguing to me because it has 1 acre, but we can see that the house is right here. Clearly they have a carport, and they also have all of this paved stuff here with a little grass patch in the back. For this property in specific, I would either purchase a tiny house, build a container home, add an RV in the back. You can easily rent it out. I've never heard of the city in particular. That's why we go directly to Airbnb and see if these are renting. This is roughly the area where that house was. You can see that the average nightly rate here is roughly 80 to 90 bucks, being very conservative. So if we take these daily rates, so roughly 80 bucks a month, times it by 30, remove our expenses and the days that we wouldn't rent it, because there's always going to be some open days. I like to use 70% as like a very safeguard, and you can see that we're making quite a bit of rent to cover for a mortgage payment on a house with this size and of this price. This property that I found was really interesting. I absolutely loved it, and this would be, I guess, more if you have a smaller fam. We're gonna apply this idea to it. So this one's $275. 3.2, it's a tinier mobile home. It is 5 acres, and this is exactly why I loved it. You can park an RV, live in the RV, rent a house. You can buy a tiny house, live in the tiny house, rent out the main house. You'll get a little bit more rent than if you were to rent out the tiny house. If you're renting it long term, you put some good tenants in there, leave them put, and you're still living on your property. The house isn't so intriguing itself, but you can definitely still make some very good income. Now, this next one, I couldn't find an exact property on the concept of it. I have seen some in the past, and that's if you're off of a main road or in a business area, make some storage, maybe do some RV camper parking. You can add some containers and rent out the actual containers. You can find them really affordably on Facebook. You can definitely get a little more creative and a little more outside of the box just because you're in a more commercialized area. Now, this next idea is something that I would have never thought of, but there are actual sites that you can use to rent out land on your property. This might look just like renting out the land itself. You don't need any sewage hookups, any electrical, any water for, the RV campers, tent campers, whoever, van lifers, all of those kinds of people. Looking at this specific property here, this is in Ochula, Florida, for $400K, which to me is a little bit up there. You do have 5 acres, which is really nice. A lot of it is brushed up. You're probably gonna have to spend a bit of money trying to clear this out. And if you wanted to pull the amenities for that kind of thing, it would definitely facilitate renting it. And like I said, for a pretty penny. And that's why I think land is so important to consider when we're looking at properties like this, because sometimes it's not just about the house. This next one I have seen a few people do, and I'm going to be very honest, they are making a lot of money, and I never really thought about this idea. And we're looking at a 4.2 house. However, again, I'm looking at this for the property and something very specific that I noticed that they had here, which is this barn right here, because you could easily turn them into wedding venues. And I used to work as a makeup artist, and I have been to my fair share of farm weddings that I've noticed people pay a lot of money. And what I really like about the wedding venue thing is that really it's only busy on the weekends. I've seen them go upwards of like $10,000 for a weekend. If you rent that out like 3 weekends, being conservative, that's almost $30,000 on a house that you paid $330,000 for. But everything that we just talked about in perspective, I wanted to go over our journey and how we ended up with my dream property that's allowing us to cash flow enough money to live rent-free. The scenario kind of looked like me and my husband, we had a tiny house, but we had nowhere to park it, and it's just us two, so we really don't need a lot of space. Some of those items in my buy box were having an acre plus of land to live peacefully and have our own yard without having to disturb the tenants. I also really wanted a beat-up house that we can add in some sweat equity in order to have our return on investment really fast up front. And lastly, if it had any RV or sewage hookups already on the property, that was a huge plus for us because that's what we needed for our tiny house. There are a few things that we have to do to make this property up to par in order for us to both live comfortably, like adding fencing, having to add some infrastructure. So of course these all have to be factored into the expenses, but it still made sense even after all of this. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. And now it's your guys' turn, so let me know in the comments which strategy you guys like the best, so which one's gonna fit you more. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you guys want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!